Okay, so I have 4 articles for you today, and they all come from The Advocate. So, and each one, well, 2 deal with the US, and 2 articles are from abroad. So, the first one, lawsuit accuses University of Michigan of discriminating against straight cisgender men. And normally I would be like, I don't need to pay attention to this. But considering the Supreme Court that we have, I guess I have to take this seriously. So, anyway, unfortunately, I can't I can still laugh at it, but at the same time, uh, this isn't so straightforward. So, an organization that previously sued Northwestern University claims the Michigan Law Review hires gay and transgender individuals over more qualified straight and cisgender applicants. And I remember hearing about this on Strict Scrutiny. This idea um, that it's not so much that they are discriminating against cisgendered straight white men, more so than they are just expanding their pool. So they're not only dealing with cisgendered straight white men, but they are bringing in other voices. And it's not that these applicants are lesser than. That is the thing that the far right just cannot grasp. These racists cannot grasp that you aren't inherently superior simply because you are a cis straight white man. That is not how this works. If you see someone who isn't that doing well, it's not because they got special treatment. They might just be good. So, yeah, that is the problem with this lawsuit. But again, we have the Supreme Court we do, so God only knows how this is going to go. An anti-diversity group sued the University of Michigan for discriminating against straight white men. Faculty, alumni, and students opposed to racial preferences, or FASORP, filed a federal lawsuit in Michigan against the university and individuals working at the Michigan Law Review, alleging discrimination based on race and sex preferences to select members. And I remembered incorrectly. That one was the Harvard Law Review, not the Michigan Law Review, that Strict Scrutiny was dealing with. The plaintiffs bring suit to enjoin these illegal discriminatory practices and to ensure that all components of the University of Michigan comply with their obligations under federal anti-discrimination law, the lawsuit reads. And again, it's not discrimination to acknowledge that there are other voices that are just as, if not more qualified than a cis straight white man. FASORP also sued Northwestern University in January, alleging that the Northwestern University Law Review there openly discriminate by hiring women and racial minorities with mediocre and undistinguished records over white men who had better credentials, better scholarship, and better teaching ability. Because, again, only cis straight white men are capable of functioning in society. Everybody else are just drooling morons. Why does this keep doing that? Okay. The latest lawsuit against the University of Michigan said practices at the law review changed in recent years based on practice of left-wing students and affirmative action devotees. It focuses more on discrimination related to sexual orientation and gender identity, and claims applicants to the law review were encouraged to identify those attributes in personal statements, even though the institution legally cannot ask applicants to identify those attributes. The Michigan Law Review, with the approval and acquiescence of the University of Michigan General Counsel's Office, has implemented a corrupt and illegal scheme of race and sex preferences to select its students' members, the lawsuit reads. The federal complaint uses the term sex preferences on 36 occasions and alleges that the editor-in-chief of the Law Review selects applicants from these preferred demographics over heterosexual and non-transgender white men with better grades and better scores. I'm sorry, I thought the point of the Law Review is to not just be a quality applicant, but also to have something to say. So, okay. The lawsuits come amid a push by conservatives nationwide against diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. Indeed, Florida's Board of Governors recently rejected former University of Wisconsin, Michigan President Santa Ono as the next leader of the University of Florida based on his past support of a DEI 2.0 program he later ended, as reported by Florida Politics. The University of Michigan denied allegations in the lawsuit that it had violated the rights of straight and white students. Oh, where'd I go? The university remains steadfast. The university remains steadfast in its commitment to follow the law. Spokeswoman Kay Jarvis told the Detroit Free Press, "We will vigorously defend against these allegations." Of note, the lawsuit follows a threat from President Donald Trump's administration to higher education institutions nationwide to withhold federal funding from schools deemed to be discriminating against whites and Asians. I don't believe either one's getting discriminated against, but fascinating that Asians are put in the mix. Craig Traynor, Acting Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Education, sent a letter to universities claiming American educational institutions have discriminated against students on the basis of race. All right, and of course that race is white because, again, if you're black, obviously you couldn't possibly have anything interesting to say, and you're just a drooling idiot or something. All right, so let us move on to this next article, which seriously pissed me off because of this is the foregone conclusion to this anti-trans hysteria of trans athletes, which we've talked about. Actually, the University of Pennsylvania recently has decided to ban trans athletes from women's sports, which makes me wonder, what about trans men? But okay. And to strip Leah Thomas of whatever record she broke, which I'm not going to say whether there was an unfair advantage because I don't know how long she'd been on hormones. I do not know if she went through male puberty. I don't know any of that. So I don't know if she did have an unfair advantage. But you know what? Who also didn't know that? Probably Donald Trump. So, just simply because Riley Gaines was bent out of shape and that's all he cared about, rather than actual facts. Because if you haven't noticed, he's a complete moron. So, this is the foregone conclusion. This is where things get completely ridiculous. Trans team's chess win in Germany prompts backlash. Now, I could think of trans athletes having an advantage in so many ways, eventually, especially trans women, in so many ways, in depending on the sport. But what advantage does a trans person have in chess? Seriously, are you claiming that one sex is smarter than the other? Is that what's happening now? That I assume it's men being smarter than women? I honestly have no clue what could be the reasoning for freaking out over the fact that a trans person won a chess match. But anyway, the subtitle. Chess is diverse and inclusive, the German Chess Federation said in rejecting calls for a ban on trans competitors. Good for them. In competitive chess, where the clash of queens and bishops usually eclipses cultural warfare, a teenage girl has found herself at the center of Germany's latest front in the debate over transgender women inclusion in sports. Nora Heidemann, 17, a trans girl from North Rhine-Westphalia, made history this month by winning Germany's under-18 girls championship, scoring 7.5 out of 9 points and outperforming 27 rivals. Her victory, reported by Apollo News, a German political news outlet, and later detailed in the Times of London, has triggered a fierce conversation over who belongs in women's competitions, even in pursuits where brain power, not physical power, rules the day. Yeah, we're going to go into men are smarter than girls or something, because what the fuck? Heidemann's competed in the Open Under-18 division at her state-level event, but failed to qualify directly, according to Apollo News. Her legal gender change was finalized only after the deadline for girls' registration had passed. Ultimately, she secured one of the 5 discretionary free places, awarded based on performance ratings, not gender identity, the outlet reports. Okay, so I'm still not getting why people are freaking out, because if she is good enough, which, by the way, why are we gendering chess? Why is there a girls category and a boys category? Seriously, it's chess. Still, her win has fueled skepticism from some quarters of the German chess community. Nadia Jusupov, head of the German Commission for Women's Chess and a former champion, stated that more trans women have been entering women's tournaments since Germany's Self-Determination Act took effect in 2021. Okay, I don't know if she's implying that that men are pretending to be girls in order to enter the girls' division, or if it just, well, obviously if trans girls are allowed to compete, they're going to compete. Because, duh, logic. How did this woman become a chess champion exactly? She's not very bright. The Times reported that she claimed some cisgender women players were considering quitting, fearing unfair competition. How? What is unfair about it? Are you seriously telling me that that biological men are somehow smarter and more equipped to play chess than girls? Seriously, this should not be a gendered sport. It's chess. It's about strategy. You do not. One gender is not better than the other when it comes to chess. There are some girls who are great at chess. There are some boys who are great at chess. There are boys who couldn't logic themselves out of a wet paper bag. And then there are girls who couldn't do that. It has nothing to do about what your biology is. What the hell? I think this chick just doesn't like trans women and is making shit up. Because unless there are more chess players who are this fucking stupid and this bigoted, I'm going to call bullshit. Jusupov suggested a 1-year waiting period for newly legally recognized trans women before competing in women's categories, a proposal that reportedly found support among some women's chess referees. Again, why? What is your reasoning? I can understand in swimming. I mean, like I said just before I started reading this, I don't know the specifics of Leah Thomas, so I can't even begin to pretend I know whether she had an unfair advantage. Okay, fine. But this is chess. It's a game of strategy. Women, the reason there are girls' sports is to show that girls can compete too. That they do not need to, that they're not these delicate little flowers who can't handle sports. Now you're telling me that in a sport that requires just brain power, that men are somehow naturally smarter and more strategic than girls. What kind of fucking feminists are you? And if you say you're not feminist, then you should not be competing in chess. You should be staying home, learning how to find a husband, and learning how to cook, how to clean for your man, and just pop out babies. Because what are we doing here? The German Chess Federation has rejected any ban, citing Germany's new legal protections and stressing that chess is diverse and inclusive. Federation President Ingrid Lauterbach condemned the discriminatory backlash Heidemann has faced on social media, saying, "We're an inclusive sport and want to be so." You know what would be even more inclusive? If you stop gendering. Let's get rid of the categories. Again, why? Why do we have separate categories for boys and girls in chess? Heck, I don't even think that curling should be segregated. And at least with them, they're pushing brooms and working hard to try to curl the stone. So, and I don't even think that should be segregated. And chess doesn't even have that physical requirement. Internationally, the World Chess Federation imposed a temporary ban in 2023, preventing trans women from women's tournaments pending further review. A rule Germany opposes, pointing out that a trans woman had already claimed a national women's title in the early 2000s, Apollo News reports. Why is nobody pointing out the fucking obvious? That boys and girls are no different in how they play chess. Why are we not stating the bleeding obvious? Is it because then you'd have to advocate for desegregating chess and having boys and girls play against each other? Seriously, what's wrong with that? Again, even curling has mixed doubles, has mixed team. They acknowledge that men and women can play together. Why are we not doing that with chess? It is so weird. So that's the end of that article, which that ended abruptly. But yeah, I just do not understand that. This should fall under pointlessly gendered. Because what the heck? Why are we gendering a sport based on mental brain power? Who has the better strategy in winning chess? Because my understanding is this high level of chess, there's all these different gambits and moves and scenarios in your head that you can go over, that I just cannot imagine that biological males are somehow better equipped to deal with than girls. It's just so freaking stupid. Anyway, let's move from Germany to the UK. Provided the Advocate gives me the freaking article. Come on. Okay, now maybe it'll let me. I've been having problems with the Advocate all day. Alright, so UK Prime Minister pushes to ban trans people from single-sex bathrooms, sports, and beyond. You know, I don't know why Labour is doing this. The Tories already have a monopoly on being bigots. What was his name? Jeremy, shoot, I can't think of his name. He was kicked out of his party. He was kicked out of the Labour Party for anti-Semitic comments. But shitting on trans people is all right. I do know that at one point they were pro-trans and then they started to backslide. And now we're doing this shit. I'm sorry, are you trying to make it so people go to, say, the Liberal Democrats or somebody else? Because the hell? Alright, so subtitle. Keir Starmer said the ruling that trans women are not considered women under the nation's Equality Act must be applied as soon as possible. Are we... it's like Keir Starmer wants to self-destruct his administration. It's like, oh, I was just kidding when I said I wanted to be prime minister, so I'm going to blow it up. What are we doing? The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom is calling on public agencies to enforce a recent Supreme Court decision by barring transgender people from facilities that align with their gender identities. Well, okay. At least he's just like, well, we got to follow the Supreme Court. Even though, I don't know enough about UK law to know if the Supreme Court was actually reading the law correctly or they're just a bunch of bigots. Because if it were in this country, I know which side I would be on. Keir Starmer said at a NATO summit in The Hague last week that the court's April ruling determining trans women are not legally considered women under the nation's Equality Act must be applied as soon as possible. This is expected to impact trans people's access to bathrooms, hospital wards, sports clubs, domestic violence shelters, and more. Yeah, I can't imagine what could possibly go wrong with that. We've accepted the ruling, welcomed the ruling, and everything else flows from that, as far as I'm concerned, Starmer said. Therefore, all guidance needs to be consistent with the ruling, and we need to get to that position as soon as possible. Translation: we were never for trans people. We are perfectly fine with throwing them under the bus and making their lives a living fucking hell. Great. So this isn't just that the Supreme Court made this ruling. It was like, please, please, please rule the way we want you to so we have an excuse to be horrible to trans people. Scotland, which is part of the UK but has semi-autonomous government, passed a law in 2018 that all Scottish public organisation boards must have an equal number of men and women members. Trans women were included in the number of women board members if they had the gender recognition certificate. For Women Scotland, a right-wing organisation dedicated to so-called women's sex-based rights, a dog whistle used by anti-trans activists to exclude trans people from public spaces and reduce women to their genitals. It is just so ironic that women claim that they want to be, and I'm sure these women themselves would rather not be just thought of as boobs and vagina. But somehow when it comes to trans women, absolutely the only thing about us that means anything. It's just so weird. Filed a lawsuit against the government challenging the inclusion of trans women. They initially lost their case in Scotland before appealing to the UK Supreme Court, which ruled in their favour. The country's Equality and Human Rights Commission issued guidance shortly after the ruling that banned trans people from single-sex facilities, in some cases even those that match their sex assigned at birth. Wait, what? Okay, so they can't go to the women's bathroom, but they can't go to the men's bathroom either. So there's a third option? There's a gender-neutral bathroom? Because what the hell? The ruling has already been applied by some agencies, including the Football Association, which banned trans women from playing women's soccer in May without mentioning trans men. Of course, because obviously women are naturally weaker than men, so it's okay to compete against men because they're not going to do any damage or something. Ignoring the fact that this could hurt the trans men because they're going up against people much stronger than them. But, obviously bigots don't think that far ahead. Anyway, Pride Sports, an LGBTQ plus sports organization, told the New York Times that there were fewer than 30 trans women playing women's soccer in England and Scotland, and they had done so without incident. Of course, because the only people who have a problem with it are the bigots. Because the bigots have convinced a bunch of useful idiots that the reason that they aren't at the pinnacle of their sport is because of trans women, not because they don't happen to be that good. I mean, the delusion that has to go into this, because all I can think of is Riley Gaines getting 5th in a tournament, in a meet, tying with a trans person for 5th. And somehow trans women are ruining sport because they got 5th. And so that means that they got the gold or something. Meanwhile, hate crimes against trans people have increased almost 200% in the last 5 years in England and Wales, according to the UK government. Gee, it's almost like if you scapegoat people, that people will respond in kind and attack them. Who knew? All right, so let's move on to my final article, if the Advocate is going to do what it's told. Wisconsin Supreme Court strikes down abortion ban from 1849. And for those of you who are long-term followers of this channel, know I'm from Wisconsin, so yay. A 176-year-old law, this is the subtitle, does not prohibit abortion in the state of Wisconsin. The state Supreme Court has ruled. And, we've had laws that superseded this rule, and I never understood why, when Roe v. Wade was overturned, that they went to this law instead of the superseding ones. I mean, let's just scream we desperately want to ban abortion without, actually saying it. The Wisconsin Supreme Court's liberal majority has struck down a 106-year-old near-total abortion ban, finally protecting access to the care 3 years after losing it nationally. The state's highest court ruled 4-3 Wednesday that the legislature implied repeatedly that the 19th century near-total ban on abortion by passing a law in 1985 that allows abortions up until fetal viability and after if the health or life of the pregnant person was threatened. Therefore, a law from 1849 does not prohibit abortion in the state of Wisconsin, which is great. And that explains why the anti-abortion crowd screamed that this is the law of the land now. Because the superseding law in 1985 was way too practical, made too much fucking sense. Because, of course, you should be able to have an abortion up until viability. Because it's just insane where people would scream how this is a baby. It's not fucking viable. It is literally attached to a woman's body and could potentially be killing her, or the fetus just will never become viable. I mean, there is only one person who can make those decisions about viability, and that's the freaking doctor. Not a bunch of yahoos who are so worried about future children, but don't give a rat's ass about the children that exist now. This case is about giving effect to 50 years' worth of laws passed by the legislature about virtually every aspect of abortion, including when, where, when, and how healthcare providers may lawfully perform abortions. I can't see. The majority wrote, "The legislature, as the people's representatives, remains free to change the laws with respect to abortion in the future." After the U.S. Supreme Court struck down Roe v. Wade in 2022, God, it's been 3 years. It seems like so much longer. Abortion providers in Wisconsin were unsure if they would be affected by the centuries-old law, which makes it a felony for anyone other than the person who is pregnant to intentionally destroy the life of an unborn child. Translation: you cannot go to a doctor and have an abortion, but you can throw yourself down the stairs in hopes that you end up miscarrying. Alrighty then. Dane County Circuit Judge Diane Schlipper ruled in 2023 the law does not ban consensual abortions, but rather feticide. terminating a pregnancy without consent. To which I say, well, duh, feticide should be illegal because, yeah. The state Supreme Court concurred in its opinion, writing, "We view that paragraph as doing merely what it says it does, creating an exception to the newly enacted feticide statutes." The court's decision was along party lines and comes just a few months after a heated election between liberal Susan M. Crawford and conservative Brad Schimmel. Crawford won by 10 points and maintained the court's liberal majority despite Schimmel's anti-transgender attack ads against her and Tesla CEO Elon Musk's $1 million giveaway to 2 Republican voters. Which makes it so beautiful that Elon lost so much money to try to stump for Schimmel, who, I might add, was already on the Supreme Court once and lost his job. So, it's not just that he was running these attack ads. People remember him from before, and they didn't like him before. Oh, wait. Brad Schimmel wasn't on the court. He was the attorney general. Still, people were familiar with him. It's not like your typical judge or justice that runs for these type of positions where you're like, I have no clue. I have no idea who any of these people are. Brad Schimmel was a known quantity. So yeah, it's just, you can't say it's because of his attack ads. People knew who he was already. So, yeah. Executive Director of the ACLU of Wisconsin, Melinda Brennan, said in a statement that with the ban struck down, Wisconsin is a more free and more just place to live, but that doesn't mean it's time to back down. The political attacks on reproductive justices will not slow down, and we must remain vigilant to make sure everyone who can get pregnant has access to the full range of reproductive health care, no matter where in the state they live, Brennan said. Politicians will keep trying to legislate away and restrict our reproductive rights as we roll back LGBTQ rights, freedoms of expression, and more. While we should celebrate this momentous win, we can't let up. Now, that is the last article I have from The Advocate. And all I can say is this is why I switched to The Advocate from LGBTQ Nation. Not once in any of the articles did they talk about such and such person being out or such and such person being trans. This article, there was absolutely nothing about it that screamed LGBT plus rights. Just because there was one quote about we have to worry about if we lost this right, we could lose this, and this. So yeah, that's why I prefer The Advocate, because they don't hit you over the head with, such and such a person. We're only going to print articles where there is a person involved who's a part of the LGBT plus community. No, that's not a prerequisite, and to scream in neon lights all the time who that person is. I'm sure The Advocate does it when it's relevant, but otherwise, they just report the news. So, like I said, that is all I have, I believe, for this video. Let me just make sure there isn't another related article that I'm interested in. Nope. Nope, I believe that is it. So with that, I will see you guys in the next video.